Speakers may only address council once for a maximum of 3 minutes, unless authorized by unanimous vote of council and the members present. Speakers must, that's a new, I haven't seen that word. Speakers must restrict their remarks to items that are listed on the meeting agenda. Speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given prior to council's consideration of assurances of the permit. Speakers shall address all comments through the mayor or presiding member, which is me. So, do we have anyone from the public? So, Breton and
My name's Chad.
Chad?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm Ian McIsaac, Chainsaw Carver.
Okay. So there's 3 people that are coming up? Okay, so who would like to go first? Okay, Breton?
Am I okay to remove the map?
What's...
I can leave it on.
No, I think so that. to
Yeah,
make
I
sure
think so
that-
we can hear you.
I mean, the reason that we don't wear our masks is so when we have to speak,
People
we're
can hear.
not taking it off every
Yeah.
time and.
Okay, so I'll just leave it
No,
on.
you can,
Okay.
you can take it off so
Whatever's-
that the people, so, because it's recorded, so people can hear you speak.
Thank you. My name is Brenton Raby, through the mayor. Thank you. 512 Hendrick Street. As you all know, I'm a regular attendee at council meetings. I generally try and be well behaved, although on certain times I do have an almost impulsive disorder, in which case I might do this. I would never do those in an undertaking out of any disrespect. Also, prior to the previous meeting, I felt I had done a bit of research to try and understand the legality or the proper way of filming a meeting. I did not set out to film that meeting in its intention. I have an amputation on my hand that leads me to cramp, and my handwriting deteriorates quickly. So I felt that was a very good discussion, and I was simply recording in the attempts to try and make a record for me to reference. So after having reconsidered and heard other things, I will agree and understand and comprehend why that sort of discussion would not be proper to be filmed. But I would draw your attention to the wall, which says that these meetings are available on the internet. I would also like to point out, just a matter of procedure, that the special regular council meeting is not streamed live and there is not a video link. If there was a video link, I can tell you most assuredly I would not have been recording and would be referring to that. So huge respect for the work you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenton.
Thank you, Brent.
So sorry, can you state your name, your
My
full
name's-
name into the microphone so that it's recorded?
Okay, my name is Chad Matthew Bilesma,
And where are you living?
and I am staying down in Cottonwood Falls.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering because 20 years ago I lived here, and I had great ideas, and but then I got called back to my family in Kamloops because they wanted me to be there with them. But then I came back here because I believe that there's this something about this town. It's a queen city. It has a big heart, right? And so I actually wanted to propose a space allowance for down by Cottonwood Falls, like just on the far side of the parking lot, so not next to the recycling area, but just a space just along the far side, where under that street light there and stuff like that. But I wanted to do paddle tours out of there this summer, and have a bunch of boats, and I have a paddle tours idea. And I would call it mystical tours, like Bright Fame mystical tours, because it has a collective flash mob ceremony as a part of the tour. So I would canoe people to a place and then do the flash mob ceremony, blow them away, and then we just paddle back like, whoa, that was neat. And then and use a little space on the dock just to the prestige dock as a part of the ceremony as well, so that you could show the public, so that they can see, hey, this is a really cool ceremonial flash mob, we want to join in, and then it expands the heart of the space. So basically it's a proposal for Queen City liberation, like a greater joy expansion in the Queen City. And so I've already seen it work many times, and I would actually love to just have an opportunity to present it to you guys at some time in history or now. I do it anytime because I'm a busker, right? I'll go on the street, just throw it down, present it. People will be like, "Wow, that was stoking," right? And then they'll give you a bunch of money, and I'm good, right? But I actually want to expand it because like I want to, exposure leads to enlightenment, so I want to expand the concept, even to involve. I was hoping actually like a little 20 by 20 space, just down by the Salvation Army in front of it. It's like as a traffic circle for people to go around, and then there's an art space there. But you know, I mean, you can use space, right? You don't know. Like for me, I don't know for sure because you guys know the town. You know how it's all laid out. Am I over 3 minutes?
It's getting, you probably have to have in there a minute.
Okay, so you guys know how the town is laid out, but I think that I can almost see traffic circles in almost every intersection, a 20 by 20 foot space that you can easily drive around, and you can have art spaces for each of those spaces, and they're prime spaces, like they're full visibility spaces. And
Okay.
so anyway,
Thank you very much for your idea.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
love
yeah.
Love the enthusiasm.
yeah, it's so cool, Queen City stuff, man. Just boom, I could just blow this place away in a
But
wonderful way.
I missed something at the beginning. Did you say you were looking for something at Cottonwood Falls to
What?
run boat tours down the creek? I didn't
Well, no,
know.
yeah, just like I was looking for a prime space where you could grab tourists and say, hey, here,
Oh, I see.
not grab them, because I know it's a neutral space there at the falls, very neutral, but if they came over to my space, then they'd say, hey, what's this about? And me and Carver would say, hey, this is our space. We rock the house. We are the Queen City, baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, anyway, I'm saying like, an art space, right?
I hear you.
An art space down at the Cottonwood Falls.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're thinking about a musical there in your head?
I
was just figuring like,
This
okay.
guy's a genius artist too, man. Like, there's a space there.
I just read stuff on the wood. It's awesome.
You want to come up?
Yeah, sure. No, very good. I'm a chainsaw. Sorry.
You have to sit down, state your name.
Say your name, where you live.
My name's Ian Patrick Angelo McIsaac, and I live wherever my truck is parked because I have a wood stove in it, and like I just like go around and make wood stuff. And I can make anything out of wood, but I don't know how to market this skill. Okay, recently I found a huge log. I've been staying down at Cottonwood Falls beside Chad, and I stay there simply because it's a big coliseum and it like is insulated and it takes all the noise away and it doesn't go anywhere. And that's why I like to cut down there, because the noise doesn't go past the industrial part of the town, right? And so that would be a good place for me to be also. And plus with the market there, I could have it all covered in sawdust so there's no dust.
So what is it you're asking for? Or what
I
is
would
your...
like to be beside him, but I have another question that's pertaining to this, that's to do with the city, right? So I found this huge piece of wood. It's a controversial piece of wood. It's up on the north side of Cottonwood Lake. It's that one that got cut down after the fact. I want to bring this piece of wood back to life, and I make these big giant hand chairs. And I want to make these big giant hand chairs out of this piece of wood that's laying in the snow up there. And I want to have these hand chairs put around the town, like up one at Pulpit Rock, one out at the Bluffs, and like up at the Sloboda, and like over here on this side. And like then you guys can go with your tourism and say like, where else in the world can you have a view like this sitting in the hand?
So I think if it's at Cottonwood Lake,
Yes.
that's the regional district.
But it's like I want to have them in the city here, so like I
Right.
want, yeah.
So I'm not sure.
It's such a good piece of wood. It's a shame for it to be laying there rotting in the forest. Because I don't know what to do anymore, so this is what I did. Sorry.
District.
Yeah.
It's in the regional district.
Yeah, removal of wood, you'd have to talk to the regional district because it's outside of the city.
I went there, I never got any reply.
Right.
You talk to the parks manager?
I phoned and left messages and never got no response.
Well, if you want to put in can you give us a written proposal of what you?
I sure can. That's what I already had written down. Oh man, Dad, you don't got that still, hey?
I think
Got that on your fancy phone gadget there. Take a picture of that thing.
so. I think if you write down
Yeah.
clearly,
Okay.
bullet point, what you're trying
goal
to,
is?
to do?
Yeah,
What's
trying
your
to
goal?
boost the tourism here with the hand chairs, because people see that, or
Yeah.
see people sitting in this, and I'm trying to make these hand chairs like this wide.
Okay.
Big enough for 2 people, right?
So then could he give that proposal?
Yeah, just bring it up to the second floor.
Because that'd be like, your tourism, I bet you will just like, people don't get to see that every day anymore, right? And
So you
that'll
could-
like boost the morale of the, like when I was making stuff down by the airport down there, every people was coming down by there all the time. And they were telling me I was doing a good job, and they would just give me money to go and like, go get more wood.
Right?
And so I would.
Okay.
And like, people's morale and stuff, they were talking and they were like, happy.
So-
So now I got more tickets from these guys, and I wasn't even there. This bylaw guy gave me tickets for $1,300, and I'm like not even at this location where somebody has a fire down there, and I got $1,300 fine, and I wasn't even like there for 2 days. What's up with this?
So the,
Don't you guys check those cameras?
so the 3 minutes is up. I think what you should do is you should do a bullet point description of what you want. Come in and hand it up here, and we'll go from there.
Okay,
Okay?
but what do I do with these tickets though?
That's a different issue. So
But this is it's a bylaw ticket, and this is the city, no?
Yeah, you'd have to, police run bylaw for us, so you'd have to go.
you have to talk to the police about that. Bylaw and police they work as a unit.
They're enforcing our bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Oh, okay, I see.
So you'd have to go talk to
I'll
the
go
police.
talk to those guys. Soon as we get out of here. Those are good guys over there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the public presentations. And we're moving on now to
Everybody's smiling on there now.
presentations. Our first delegation, actually, sorry, presentations is a separate. It's
On the agenda, it is-
it's
yeah,
separate.
we're right
Just
to go.
there.
okay, so we're gonna go right to delegations. So our first delegation. So our first delegation today is the Kalein Center, and specifically the Navcare program. And I'll give you the analysis summary here is Aaron Thompson, Program Manager for the Kalein Center Navcare program, is presenting to council with regard to the program and its efforts to support the community during the pandemic. So we're looking for an Aaron Thompson, and there's Aaron. Aaron, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
And
Great.
I just want to check, everyone, Nicole, or Council Renwick, Council Charwood, Council Page, can you all hear this all? Okay, they're good, Aaron. So are you going to be
Okay.
sharing with us?
Yeah, I'm going to try and share my screen. Do you see that?
We do see that.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for having me here tonight. This is a really new way of presenting to council, so I really appreciate you making the time. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk to council just to give you an update because I really appreciate the support that you have given to the Navcare program, and I wanted to share, you know, what's up and what's next for us. So we'd like to thank our funders. You'll notice the City of Nelson in the corner here. You have funded us in the past, and we do really appreciate that. So just go over what is Navcare, because I don't expect you guys to remember everything from like 2 years ago. The goal of the Navcare program is to improve the quality of life of adults living with declining health by matching them one-to-one with specially trained volunteers. These volunteers provide social, emotional, and practical support, and they are trained to identify available community services, advocate for clients and families, facilitate connections to community and resources, and promote active engagement. So in terms of like the population that we're working with, it's people who are experiencing loneliness and social isolation, potentially a recent loss, so they might be bereaved. They might have mobility and sensory challenges. So for example, we have seen quite a few people in our program who have lost sight or hearing and are adapting to that new reality. They might be facing multiple concurrent life changes, increasing disengagement, coping with multiple decisions, having difficulty finding or accessing information and resources, or they might have a perceived need. And so that one's kind of the key one, bold that one, because we don't want to make it restrictive, like you have to check a box to be able to get into the program. We make it open. If someone feels like they could benefit from the program, then we would definitely consider it for them. Occasionally we talk with people and we see that there's like a better program fit for them in another program, but in general, it's a very inclusive and open program. One of the things that has changed for us since the last time I came to talk to you is that originally this was a program designed only for seniors, and we have expanded it to include all adults with declining health last summer because we realized that people of all ages that are living with declining health are facing a lot of the same challenges. And I think it's been a really positive thing because we started by making some exceptions, and then we realized there's actually a population here that needs this added support, and particularly people who are younger don't have as many programs that are aimed at them because it is more uncommon. So why was it developed? Adults with declining health are at risk for poor quality of life and social isolation. 1 in 5 seniors struggle with day-to-day activities, so extra support can help them stay at home for longer. Even though we've expanded the program, I would still say the majority of our clients are in the senior population. It acts as a mutual referral service for healthcare and community service organizations, which is really key because many resources go underutilized simply because people don't know they exist. They're too overwhelmed to go through all the different options, and in the Kootenays, I have found not everything is on the internet. And not everybody has access to the internet and knows how to navigate it. And it's the culmination of 14 years of research. It was developed as a joint venture between the University of British Columbia and the University of Alberta, and we actually contribute to that research. So we work in partnership with them, we give them feedback, we have helped develop changes and iterations, and we've been really lucky because we were selected as one of the 5 hub sites in terms of all the different Navcare programs, of which I think there are about 30 in Canada. Nelson was chosen as one of those ones to receive extra funding to support that research component. So that's really exciting. A lot of people ask about the name. So Navcare is an acronym. It sounded too much like end care if you just had like N care, so that's the nav part. So in terms of navigating, we're talking about adapting to a new reality. We're not talking about healthcare system navigation. We do refer out to the community social workers for that. Connecting is really about combating loneliness and social isolation, particularly in the time of COVID. Advocating, so we really empower people to self-advocate. We don't stand in for people, but we give them the resources, the information that they need to advocate for themselves. Resourcing is using our local resources to the fullest extent, and the engagement part. That is actually often about rebuilding confidence. Once you've had a fall, once you've had a brain injury, it's really hard to go back into your life and, return with the same confidence. And so it's about how do we bring meaning into people's lives again? How can we support them to re-engage with their own lives? So it works in complement to the healthcare system. We're not looking to detract or duplicate existing services. The key part is that volunteers address the needs that fall outside of the responsibilities of healthcare providers, but that greatly affect client ability to stay healthy or access healthcare. Volunteers have the luxury of time to engage, listen, support decision-making, and assist clients with practical things that help meet their needs. And this in turn means that healthcare providers can then have more time to work on their specialty. For example, we've worked with the ambulance service because they have told us that often they get calls for people who are just lonely. And of course, this isn't the best use of our emergency services, and it's not going to solve the problem for someone else. They're going to have someone at their place for 5 minutes, right? So it's how can we work with this to maximize the goodwill of volunteers in the community to support these added needs. In terms of what we're seeing in our community right now, I felt like this might be interesting to you. We've seen more demand for mental health support than there are services. I think that that's a really big thing because what exists right now in terms of services is really just crisis support. So it'd be kind of like if for physical care, we only had an emergency department in town. We're seeing a really heavy toll of loneliness and social isolation. But on the positive side, we also see the community with a desire to be a part of the solution. So we do, have this ongoing recruitment of volunteers who really want to give back to their community. We've seen the breadth of the COVID impacts both on volunteers and clients, which really, the staff support the volunteers support the clients. It's all like a circle of care here. We've seen also the strain on healthcare workers and the associated service cuts, understaffing, and burnout. And by no means do I blame them at all. It's just something that impacts both them and the client health. We see a growing awareness of the challenges faced by adults with declining health and caregivers of all ages. So that's a potentially positive outcome of COVID. And the lack of bridging support for patients that are waiting long-term care placement. So a lot of what we work with people who are on the cusp of being able to stay at home or not is trying to find those added resources so they can live at home for as long as possible, which tends to also correlate with higher quality of life. In terms of the value that it brings to the community, so Navcare supports our overburdened healthcare system. As I said, going to the doctor to have a friendly visit isn't the best use of our healthcare resources. And so we're working with the new concept of social prescribing, where volunteers can really fill that need in people's lives. Clients have expressed gratitude for the additional support. And the key part here is that it's available when they most need it. We're actually been really lucky that we've gotten to see over the course of the 2.5 years that I've been doing this, that some of our clients have what I call graduated from our program, which means that the added support over a 1 to 2.5 year period has enabled them to rebound to the extent that they actually no longer need help, which is super exciting. And those are, it's not everybody who's going to have that kind of health outcome, but it's really exciting to be able to see that and be a part of it. We're reducing the burden and feelings of overwhelm, often experienced by family caregivers. I think it contributes to the development of a beautiful and sometimes unlikely friendships. We've seen some really amazing matches, and it's beautiful to see. And I think by centering the needs and experiences of adults with declining health, Navcare fosters social inclusion and helps to build more age and ability-friendly communities. Nelson is a difficult place to navigate for a lot of geographic reasons, but also living rurally provides these extra challenges to living well with declining health or chronic illness. And so trying to make it a place where people can live at all stages of life in with the highest possible quality of life is really our goal. The last thing that I didn't have on there was just that it actually is really helpful too for volunteers, I find, because it can give them a sense of purpose and something positive they can do in the midst of a global pandemic where, a lot of it really feels outside of our control, but this is something tangible that they can contribute to the betterment of their communities. And then lastly, how can you help as council? We always appreciate spreading the word. It's really helpful to, have the word out in the community because the whole thing about social isolation is that people aren't getting that contact. And so how do you reach those people? Is by making it more well known. In the community, we always welcome new clients and volunteers. In particular, we're recruiting more volunteers. Not sure if anyone on this call, I know you are all doing a lot of volunteer community service already as council, but maybe there's someone in your life or someone listening on this call that was maybe feeling inspired. And then the last part is continuing to support this value initiative. I would really appreciate that. I've been really grateful that we have continued to be able to offer service throughout the pandemic. We've really pivoted, adapted. It's been a challenge, but it's been a really rewarding one, moving our training online for volunteers, finding grants to get tablets so that we can bridge those in-between times where we've temporarily suspended in-person visits when the case counts are really high, like earlier this year. All of those things, but I'm really glad that we're still able to be out and be supporting people. So I will leave it there and just see if you have any questions for me.
All right, thank you, Erin. Thank you for the presentation. And I was wondering if, is there anybody in council that would like to ask a question or CAO?
Nicole's got her hand up.
Nicole, sorry, you're in a small little box, Nicole. I can hardly see you, but yes, Nicole, please go ahead. Or actually, Councillor Charwood, please, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. I really value the work you do, and I missed your last presentation, so I got all caught up. And if there's anything I can do to help with that information sharing that you're asking of us, I'm a driver for Kootenai seniors, so I do highly recommend council spend time with people in our community who maybe don't have time to get involved in politics and, you know, the day-to-day busy of our city, that it's really, it's a great perspective, and we know that there's growing numbers, right, of people in need. So it's pretty grounding work. So if I can do anything, Erin, to support that, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Councillor Charwood. Is there any other questions? Yep. CAO, Cormac?
How does one get a hold of Navcare?
So you can reach out directly to the Kalein Center by phone or by email, or I think you'll have my direct contact information potentially as part of this. Either way really works for us. We're all working from home, so it might take a day or so to get the message relayed, but either way works for us. And I also just wanted to say really quickly, thank you, Councillor Charwood. I may be in touch because it'd be great for you to have some brochures with you, and that's really wonderful that you're volunteering with Kootenai seniors.
All right. I just wanted to say, Erin, that I am often, especially with doing this job, I'm often really taken aback by the level of care and services that our town provides. For a little town of 10,000, we have an amazing menagerie of organizations that are helping people, and you're one of those. So I do want to thank you for your work that you do out there.
Thank you.
Oh, and Councillor Luttenberg wants to ask a question.
No, just to, for the public, it's kaleincenter.org.
KaleincCenter.org if you
Yeah.
want to.
Or just search Google, Kalein
Okay.
Center.
Yeah,
All right.
I've got it in the corner.
Well, thank you very much, Erin.
Thank you. Okay, I will hopefully return the control
Yes.
to you folks.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you take care out there.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Sarah.
All right. So that was the Kalein Center. Our next agenda item is the economic conditions of arts, culture, and heritage sector. And the analysis summary is Andrea Wilkie from Community Futures and Sydney Black from the Nelson District Arts Council and Sarah Breen from the Selkirk College have requested the opportunity to present to Council with regard to the economic conditions of the area's arts, culture, and heritage sector. And we have everyone up there. All right, so we have Sydney, we have Sarah, we have Andrea. How are we moving forward? Are you guys going to share?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen here. There we go. Sydney warned me about this.
Wow.
I'm supposed to be incredibly tech savvy, and yet here we are. Can folks see my presentation?
All I see is a button that says share application. Maybe if you close that, it'll show the whole thing. But I can see the presentation behind the little box that says share application. I can see the picture back there.
I can't make it go away. Oh, this is so embarrassing.
It's like rendering. It's trying. I would unshare and reshare. Looks like it's drawing.
I apologize for this. I'm actually normally quite good at it.
We have it on our pads, but it doesn't help the
Yeah,
viewing
the
audience not to be able to see it. We do have your presentation on our screens, but
Councillor Page could share, or Renwick or Charlotte.
It won't even let me stop sharing. I'm not sure how to do this.
It's okay.
Yeah, the share has stopped on our end. We just see Sarah.
So Sarah, Gabe here in the chamber is going to try to share it from here.
Andrea, did you want to start with the introduction while I figure out or try and figure out what's going on here? Again, my sincere apologies for this.
I just want to say it's okay. This is how it is in this new age. So please don't worry.
There.
There we go.
Gabe, that was you,
Gabe.
was it? That's Gabe.
So we see it now. Gabe has put it up on the screen. What do you guys see from your end?
Yeah, we see the PDF up there.
Okay.
Did the presenters see the PDF though? None of them seem to be saying anything. Sydney, can you see it?
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see economic conditions of areas, arts and
So
culture.
maybe
and
your
heritage
presenter
sector.
just needs to start and then we can scroll up through the things for you.
That sounds. I can't see it, but that's fine. I will figure it out while Sydney while Andrea gets us started.
Okay. So who's going to begin?
Andrea, you're muted.
Oh, the challenges.
That's not confidence inspiring. Have we lost Andrea? This is great. This is totally how the evening's gonna go.
Give me 1 sec. I'm gonna pull up. Okay, yeah, she's here. We can't hear her. That is great.
Okay. No. Andrea.
Just heard her.
Gabe. Do you,
Yes.
is it worthwhile for them to log off and log back in, or is it?
I think it's on their end because I think they're probably trying to do with multiple monitors.
Oh, there's a lot of people working. Okay.
You're probably like standing and not looking probably.
Computers are bogging down.
How's that microphone?
We just heard you again, Andrea.
Yep.
Did I get it now? Okay. Okay.
Okay, so Andrea, Sydney, and Sarah, can you see the presentation? All of three of you? Yes.
Thumbs up.
Okay.
Hey,
Can I get each one of you? Can you talk? Each one of you separately. Sydney.
I'm here.
Okay. Sarah.
I'm here.
Andrea.
Present.
Okay.
we can
So-
turn all.
I think we can go ahead if one of you want to take the lead.
Okay, I'll start us off. Thanks for your patience with us getting sorted. So I'm here on behalf of the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership this evening, and joining me is Dr. Sarah Patricia Breen, who's the Regional Innovation Chair in Rural Economic Development at Selkirk College, and Sydney Black, who's the Executive Director of the Nelson District Arts Council, as well as the Chair of the Cultural Development Committee. So tonight's presentation is going to provide an overview of the recently completed study of the economic conditions of the Nelson and Area arts, culture, and heritage sector. The project was completed by Selkirk Innovates in collaboration with the NAEDP, the Nelson District Arts Council, and was funded by the City of Nelson through Economic Recovery Fund. Next slide. So when the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership set economic recovery priorities for 2021, one of the priority areas under sector supports was retention of arts and culture assets. And this was in recognition that the art sector was one of the hardest hit sectors by the pandemic and that it represents an important sector for our community. Next slide. So Selkirk Innovates was engaged to conduct a study to understand the value of the sector to our local economy, the impact of COVID-19 on the sector, and to identify opportunities to support the sector to recover. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now to speak to the study approach and some key findings.
Sure. So next slide, please. So I want to highlight a couple of pieces related to the work that we did. And the first is, and I know as an academic, we always say that the methods are important, but it's really important for us to understand that what we did focuses on what I would call the supply side of the sector. So the individuals, the workers, the organizations, and the businesses. We didn't directly include the demand side of things, so the patrons and audiences, and so that's a methodological difference that's important for folks to keep in mind. So we basically put together a survey, an online survey, and did some targeted interviews as well, and we looked at the impact of COVID-19 as well as some more traditional business retention and expansion type questions. And based on the data that we collected, I also did an economic impact assessment using a variety of different data points. And we also brought in some other studies and relevant literature to compare our findings against as well. So next slide, please. Did the slide go to the next one, or?
Yes.
I'm trying to juggle my notes and that type of thing. This is in no way, anyways. So I'm not going to, so we should be on the national and provincial context slide. And given the time that we have, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Feel free to ask questions if you'd like to know more. But the key takeaway from this slide is that if we look at the national and provincial arts, culture, and heritage sector data, what we can see is that this sector is growing nationally and provincially. Next slide, please. And so similar, like at the local community scale, we don't have a cultural satellite account like what we would have nationally or provincially. And so we're typically limited to standard measures like the census, and that can be fairly ill-suited for this particular sector. Just there's a lot of limitations that we could get into if people are interested. But if we do look at the data that we have access to, just to give us a starting point, if you will, within the study area, Nelson's art, culture, and recreation sport employment is estimated to be at about 5.8% or 335 people, give or take. That's a low estimate given the limitations, but it gives us a starting point. So next slide, please. So in terms of the survey that we put together, it had a couple of different sections. And we have one for individuals, one for organizational managers and business owners. So if I was an artist and a business owner, I'd fill out both sections. If I was an employee, I would skip the organizational sections. And so there's a lot of moving parts in here. Based on the different sections that we pulled together, all the questions that we asked, we had about 84 completed surveys. Of those 84, 28 of them were organizations, so a business or a charity or not-for-profit. Most of them were from the city of Nelson, and we also looked into the different subsectors. Of the 5 subsectors for this particular sector, the most of the people that we talked to were performing arts or visual subsectors, so that just gives you a sense of who we were talking to. And in terms of the different perspectives that were represented, the majority of people we talked to were working artists or creators, followed by owners or operators of businesses and organizations. Most of the responding businesses and organizations were for-profit, and they had been in business, most of them, for over 10 years. Next slide, please. So continuing on from the following slide, I just want to highlight a couple pieces of information. And that top bullet is something that's important for everyone to keep in mind. Of the people that we talked to in our survey, only 27% of them received 100% of their income from the sector. That is important for a number of reasons, not the least of which would be in order to count as one of those 335 people that I mentioned for the StatsCan data, your primary income has to be from that sector. So you can start to get a sense as to why those traditional measures would be a low ball or a conservative estimate. Let's see. So our survey suggests that, you know, that difference between those traditional measures and what's local is especially large. So the survey respondents that were representing the businesses or the organizations, they were asked about the number of full-time, part-time, casual employees that they have, as well as volunteers, and that's that orange chart there, so that you can get a sense of the number and the types of employees that the organizations we spoke to have. And then the blue chart at the bottom is based on the organizations that provided that data, what the average per hour rate is and what the spread of that rate could be. As everyone I'm sure can imagine, the average often gets smoothed out by that, you know, the two ends of the range. Next slide, please. So the estimating local value, hopefully if there's additional questions on this, I'd be happy to answer them, but we wanted to use a few conservative techniques to come up with an estimate of what does this sector mean for our local economy. And so I ran these numbers using the data that we collected from the survey, cross-referencing that with Statistics Canada data, did a number of different approaches for this to get the range that is shown on the slide. And I think what's really important that I want folks to take home is that if we look at that 2003 sector report that looked at trying to put a number on the size of the sector, and compare that to what we have here, you can't compare them apples to apples. They're different methodologies, but our estimates only focusing on that supply side is equal to or greater than what was found in 2003, which was so much bigger. It was the supply side, it was the demand side, it was all of the spin-offs, all of those types of things. And so what it is that we're looking at is a sector that is strong and growing and quite important to our local economy. Next slide, please. Just want to highlight the impact of COVID-19 on individuals. There's a lot of bullet points there, but we asked folks to tell us for 2020 what their projected income was and then what their actual income was. And the actual incomes were on average 20 to 25% less than projected. In terms of the folks that were most likely to experience impacts, those were artists and contractors, particularly in performing arts and film and media, whereas business owners, employees, managers, and administrators were less likely to be impacted. Next slide. Similarly, we asked businesses and organizations about their revenue. And so again, projected versus actual. And what we found was that the percentage of the revenue that businesses and organizations get from arts, culture, and heritage really ranges basically from just above 0 to 100%. And then, so there's basically, what that means is there's a range in terms of the types of businesses that we're talking to. And in terms of revenue loss, the average revenue loss as a result of COVID was around 20%. And that impact ranged dramatically depending on the organization type and the subsector. Actual revenues were less than projected, for example, for most of the not-for-profits, whereas actual revenues remained consistent for most of the charities. It remained the same for literary arts organizations, and some of the heritage sector respondents actually reported higher than actual revenues. So you can see that when we say something that there's an average of 20% loss, that means very different things for very different groups. Next slide, please. In terms of impact on employment and volunteering, we asked about trends both for full-time and part-time employees, so full-time on the left and part-time on the right. And basically what we see here is that pre-COVID, employment in the sector was actually quite stable or increasing. Since COVID, the future trend remains stable, which is good news, but to a lesser degree than it was prior to COVID. So people are optimistic, but it's just not as good of a picture as it looked prior to. Next slide, please. So I'll just mention a couple of things on here. The graph, for example, folks were having issues with recruitment and retention, similar to many other sectors in the city. You can see some of the key reasons, cost of living and housing listed there. If folks want to dive into that, you can feel free to ask questions. Next slide, please. And similarly to the last slide, these are identified challenges from individuals on the left, business and organizations on the right. I'm sure that these will, resonate with folks in terms of being similar to some other sectors and impacts that we've all felt from COVID-19. I want to make sure I give Sydney time at the end, so next slide, please. And so in terms of sector resilience, what we really found and what I want to communicate is that the impacts of COVID-19 are probably a little bit more complicated than folks were originally anticipating. And they might not be exactly what was expected. The data suggests that in some ways, parts of Nelson and area fared fairly well compared to other parts of the province, but the full story is a complicated one. If we think about that 27% figure that I mentioned earlier, that is really interesting in terms of comparing what our local arts, culture, and heritage sector looks like compared to an urban area where you're more likely to have near to 100% of your income from that sector. It changes what the people in our region actually need. It also should change how you view the wage data that was put up, because we know that even though the range for full-time employees was $19 to $55 an hour, all of which is above our living wage, we also know that very few people actually have full-time jobs in this sector. So for those few that do, the wages are great, but they are the norm, not the exception. From what we observed, it's possible that the precarious conditions, what I would call precarious conditions, kind of inherent within the sector, made it more resilient than it otherwise would have been. So it made it easier in some ways to adapt to COVID-19. Next slide, please. And I want to, after this slide, I will turn it over to Sydney, but with respect to uptake of COVID-19 relief funding, we found something quite interesting. 49% of the respondents indicated that they had accessed CERB, 17% had accessed the Canadian Recovery Benefit, but about 40% of our respondents hadn't accessed any relief funding whatsoever. And respondents identified a large number of gaps in existing responses and programs and this included things like the programs being inaccessible, either because they didn't support certain subsectors, there were eligibility challenges, there was barriers to access, specific issues that weren't addressed by existing programs, that the programs were unpredictable and inconsistent, and that's not a new challenge for many funding programs. Basically, it identified that there was the need for support, but the existing supports were missing the mark in certain ways. And I will turn over the next slide to Sydney.
So the three key messages that we were able to take away from the report were that the sector is important to the area, even during COVID, that the impacts have been inconsistent, and that the results highlight the sector's precariousness and resilience, as Sarah had mentioned before, and that we need to investigate further as to why there was low uptake with the support programs. Next slide, please. And so the Cultural Development Committee and the Economic Impact Working Group came together to suggest the following 5 opportunities that can arise from the findings of the study. So the first, we can provide or increase operational funding to the sector to enhance stability. We can understand why COVID support uptake was low in our area and what barriers there are to access the funding. And then we also hope to inform funders on these barriers so that they can adapt their programming to meet the needs of our region's artists. There's the opportunity to better understand and more accurately identify the size and diversity of the sector's workforce, the opportunity to improve policies and develop programming to support equity-seeking communities and to foster safe and respectful workplaces. And finally, there is the opportunity to develop a vision or a strategy for the arts, culture, and heritage sector in Nelson and area. And with that, next slide. we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present and are open to any questions that you may have.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrea, Sydney, and Sarah. Very interesting study. So I'll bring it out on the floor. Are there any questions? I see Councillor Page. Go ahead, Councillor Page.
I'll throw a question out there to get the pumps primed. Sarah, on one of your graphs as you went through there, it highlighted housing and cost of living as one of the standout signals, I believe, if I'm interpreting the graph correctly. One of the things I hear a lot about is the loss of creative studio space or artist-specific space to generate and work with space. Was that coming up, and in the working group, has that been coming up as, of course, our property market has been super hot as well, on top of everything, and there's been a lot of rotation over, but how are the cultural assets in terms of studio spaces for our artist community?
I believe it's the accommodation situation that we find ourselves in here, because it's impossible to find, a rental, a 1-bedroom apartment even right now for less than $1,200 a month, which is a very challenging thing to achieve even when you're making, $18 to $20 an hour. Even if you're making, $25 an hour, that's a hard mark to make. So definitely in all of our conversations at the CDC and outside of it, housing has been a huge barrier for artists who want to stay here and live and continue to exist here, but can't afford to at this point.
I would echo that and say, if you look through the report and our findings, in addition to that graph, there's a table number 4, that summarizes a lot of the open-ended responses that folks gave. And affordable housing, like living space as opposed to working space, was something that was talked about quite often, and came out so far. Cost of living and places to live were so far above other issues. Yeah. Andrea, anything you would?
Is there any other questions? Because I've got another one.
You have a supplemental,
Thank you for
Councillor?
that.
Okay, actually...
mine's a different question, so I would go over to another councillor first and come back.
Councillor Charlwood has a question. Sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize. Councillor Charlwood and then Councillor Lautenberg.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, everybody. I guess, Sarah, I would want to take you up on a little bit more detail on the externalities, I guess, that are not included in that, 5% number. So when we're talking about what aren't we counting, I believe you're saying that the 2003 research did a bit of that, and that's why you didn't consider the exponential impact arts has in our community. And then I had a separate question that maybe you go to first, actually riffing off the last question, which is, if cost of living is the biggest or largest barrier, I heard you say $19 is a living wage. Could I find out where you got that number from? Because I had the impression it was higher than that.
So let me look up that, and I want to give a bit of a blanket apology. I fell down a flight of stairs, I'm just going to be totally honest, and have been dealing with concussion for the past couple of weeks, which I have realized makes it very hard for me to adapt to situations that otherwise wouldn't normally not cause me stress, like having the presentation now. So super great learning for me on that.
I would be happy to follow up with an email if you want to deal with it later.
It's fine.
No problem.
And I'm just apologizing if I stumbled over my data in the presentation. And so if we look at, this should be slide number, the survey employment and wages, where we had the the wage rate data. The range of wages for full-time employees is between $19 and $55 an hour. So that's where that $19 came. That's what we were told. And then in terms of the living wage in Nelson, we took Nelson's 2021 living wage as $18.46 per hour, which is referenced in the report, and that came from Nelson's Committee on Homelessness, I believe. So that reference is in there. So basically what I was trying to say is it's interesting because the full-time wages are higher than our living wage from that particular report. But you know, those full-time jobs are rare. And the methods question is one I can actually answer because it doesn't mean I have to juggle my notes and lose my brain. The 2003 report was an economic modeling report that included the supply side and the demand side, which was not only surveys of businesses and workers and artists themselves, but it includes surveying tourists. Obviously not the easiest thing to do during COVID. And they hand created their own predictive economic model. I couldn't reverse engineer that, even if you guys, you know, if there had been triple the available budget, I still wouldn't have been able to reverse engineer that. So we took a different approach building on that business retention and expansion and a COVID survey that Sydney had brought that had been used out of the Greater Vancouver area. Used that and really focused in on the supply side, so the workers, the artists, the organizations. In order to account for those spin-off effects, I used a Statistics Canada multiplier so that we could try and get a sense as to those additional pieces. But what I've presented is very much the conservative estimate, because it wouldn't say include things like a portion of hotel revenue from tourists brought into the city and those types of things. And I would be happy ad nauseum to talk methodology with you, Nicole, if you would ever like to, because that's what I enjoy. And please feel free to follow up the email before I bore everyone to death. But there's methodological differences between the 2003 and what we did. But I am quite confident in saying that because of those methodological differences and because of our conservative estimate, it's still bigger, which, you know, says something on it.
But,
You want a supplemental?
Yeah, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
So, thanks. Yeah, I'd love to geek out with you too, and now I'm frozen, I think, am I?
No.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, okay, maybe Sarah was. Yes, I may take you up on that, and really the point of my asking that question, you just summed up beautifully, which is it's still not the full picture, and it's a bigger number, so thanks for that.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Lautenberg?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sarah, thanks for this. And I really appreciate the work and the difficulty of trying to conduct a study like this in the midst of a pandemic, especially, like you said, you had to focus on the supply side because of the difficulties of the demand side data gathering. But maybe, Sarah or Sydney, maybe you can chime in on this question, given your experience in the sector. One thing I've heard quite a bit about is the sort of the increasing gentrification of Nelson in particular, and that as the kind of that process of gentrification, the artists in particular seem to get pushed out of the gentrifying community, and then they move further out and further out and further out. And yet it seems to me that Nelson being the tourist hub, this is where the sales would happen. Even if the artists are getting pushed out, we're going to want a pretty strong, even if they're not residents, they're still our artists if this is where they sell their work, if this is where they show their work, and if this is where they contribute to the culture of the community. So first of all, can you comment on that kind of inevitable sort of processes as housing prices go up, like the gentrification question and artists being pushed out? And then what I come to, because I did see in this thing that transportation and housing both referenced pretty highly, in fact, the second and third highest, that what would you say we can do as a region to sort of create that sort of regional flow of artists and artist work so that Nelson can maintain its hub, its vibrancy as a cultural hub, even if the artists don't live here. If that makes sense.
So the City of Vancouver has actually just initiated a big project where they have created, there's artist spaces, there's artist housing that is going in that is very specific to providing for individuals from the sector. So they apply for this housing and then they're granted it for a certain amount of time. So they know that they're going to, and it's low income. So they know that they will have this space that is assured to them. So I think that, yeah, as housing is always the thing that it comes back to, providing people with a secure place to exist, and then they will be able to create. But as we see things get more and more expensive, like it's happening in Rossland, it already has happened in Whistler, like the artists just become further and further removed, and then we see less diversity in what we are exposed to in our community because those people can't continue to market their wares here. So, I think that there's definitely programs that have happened in larger centers that are very inspiring and could really help out the sector and allow us to keep supporting these people that make Nelson the special place that it is.
And thank you for that, Sydney. Some of that question is a little bit outside of the questions that we asked. So I can tell you in the survey. I can tell you what I know. I have a separate project going on right now focused on rural transportation, dealing with the jobs are in one town, affordable housing is in another town, and within other sectors outside of arts and culture, that is becoming an increasing conversation of if places are unaffordable, we need to have better rural transit systems so that we can get people to where their jobs are or to where they're selling or to where they're performing. And, and that obviously runs across sectors. We're lucky in BC and in our area that we have a rural transportation system, but working to improve that helps make this a more functional region. Instead of, at the worst case scenario, pushing people out to the extent that they're not just leaving Nelson, but they're going to the next cool, cheap place, because we see that in areas around cities and in other places where artists are typically on that cutting edge and they move around the city, and you could see it in Vancouver's neighborhoods for folks who have some familiarity with that geography. So it's not, we could have the best transit system in the world, it still wouldn't maintain the same vibe in Nelson. It doesn't work that way. It's more likely that people would potentially move on if they weren't able to afford to stay here. And so I think for all of our sectors, but in particular for our arts sector, that housing is a critical issue.
I would like to ask a question about if it seems like we keep circling around to housing, because the affordability across, we're talking food, clothes, like it's all expensive, but housing seems to be this critical piece. Are there solutions from are there analogies from other small towns, other art centers that have done some work in this area? Are you building an artist co-op? Are you building housing for artists? Do you know if there are some solutions from other locations that are similar in size?
So yeah, there's definitely, I don't know, but like similar size. Nelson is pretty unique in its size and the amount of arts and culture things that we have happening. But there's definitely molds in other larger centers that we can look to and talk about. And potentially that's something that if the city were to engage in like an arts, culture, heritage master plan, that's something that could be really looked at and dissected and find those kind of models to build off of.
Just a supplemental, I think it's really important as I'm listening to all this, that we really we maintain the focus on what a city of our size and our tax base can actually do, because a city like Vancouver, it's so far beyond us. So yeah, some of the solutions around there. Now I've seen their hand up, and I'm not sure. Is that Chalward? Okay. Is it Councillor Page? Okay, Councillor Page.
Council Page. Coming back around. I appreciate all the conversation that's happening around the table. And to me, it is a question of purpose-built housing. From a city perspective, of course, understanding all the buckets, be it arts and culture, vulnerable sectors, seniors or families. But I have spoken before, and I would urge us again at this juncture to really take the opportunity to develop a long-term strategy for this important sector. Of course, we all, I think, appreciate how Nelson is Nelson, and all of the windfalls that we receive as this beautiful town are a consequence of the diverse arts and culture community that really gives us a very specific brand and global awareness. People come here because of it, and it is more than just a very well-developed market to trade wares. So it is how people, we had some perfect examples of it earlier tonight during the public time. People have ideas, they want to express creativity, and after COVID, this sector, aside from just the economic impacts, is going to be super important to the healing process and the processing process and how we understand what's happened to everyone. So I hope as we go forward and more of some of the other works we've talked about around housing corporations and exploring those kinds of models, that we both take the opportunity being presented here to do development of a long-term strategy, that we take set some goals for ourselves on what kind of purpose-built units we want to see in the city to support that sector, and that we empower some sort of organization to address the need in our community from the residents of our community, so that the city is being built with intention for the next version of Nelson. So that's just a comment. There are no additional questions. You guys put together some really amazing work, and I really appreciate your guys' report and all the effort that went into it and all the creativity you guys bring to town.
Jesse, I have
thank you,
couple
Councillor Page.
questions.
Yep, CAO Cormac.
So, did part of your survey ask whether people had housing, owned their own houses, rented? Was that part of the survey? Because if we have long-term residents, and you bought into the market at that time, you're probably okay. But if you're a renter or a non-owner, then it is a real challenge. So I'm just interested in whether this, artists are, the normal or the abnormal for ownership or renters.
So the survey questions did not ask folks about their living situation, like whether they were renting or owning. The housing piece emerged organically through the questions about challenges that folks were experiencing. Yeah. So no specific questions on that end.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that might be a follow-up to better understand, because certainly the housing strategy, does address that. So, and I don't know if they specifically talked about sectors. And also in terms of the affordable housing projects that have happened here, do we know what kind of uptake was from people in that sector? The Fall Street project, which is workforce housing, was there an uptake by the artistic community? Were they kind of front and center in making sure they got their fair share of units? Same with the housing project here on Hall Street. Was that a strategy by the arts and culture sector to make sure that you kind of got in got some uptake on that. The people were aware of those projects, that what the criteria or any of that piece.
Yeah, so there wasn't. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask Andrea if she knew. I haven't been involved in those projects, so I don't know the detail.
Yeah, we didn't have like a specific like arts and culture based rallying for individuals to get on the lists for those housing units. But yeah, again, I saw Andrea's box turn blue, so maybe she can hear us and talk now.
I was just going to add, I think this data is going to equip us to be more proactive around those types of things. So when there are housing developments being put together, looking at do we want to designate some spots for the art sector, or to just better understand what the housing needs are of the sector. So this really gives us a good benchmark of data that can inform our future action to support the sector.
Because it might be.
I would just add, oh, I apologize. I think I cut someone off.
No, I was just going to say it might still be possible to go back to those housing providers and just to try to understand, was the awareness there? Did that sector, were they, did they get themselves on those lists for that affordable housing? Because they were built for, didn't matter what sector you were in, it was income based, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that 20 years ago in Nelson, you could work a small job, do your art half-time, and rent a house or a room, or you could rent a house for, I don't know, full house for $800. You could probably get a room for $300, or you could buy a house for $150,000. So, I mean, those days are gone, of course. But I think, it seems like the crux of the issue here is housing, because if people can have affordable housing and have that spare time to actually make art, but if you're having to work all the time to afford, it's really challenging. So it seems like housing is a big, because you have the ability to sell the art here. People, there is quite a bit of that going on, but it's that ability to live and work and make art. Is that correct?
I will let Sydney weigh in on this. I would say housing and cost of living is definitely a key piece. I know folks, I can't get into any conversations about economic development without hitting housing within about 5 minutes. But I would also encourage folks to not to overlook some of the other key findings, like the issues with support programs and granting. None of us will be able to solve the housing challenge overnight. It's endemic, it's national, it's everywhere. Andrea and I are working on it in other projects, but we might be a while on that. So, just to underscore that there are other findings that may be a little bit more immediate, tangible for folks to pay attention to, like the supports and the granting piece. But Sydney?
No, I absolutely agree with you, Sarah. That is also a lot comes from that, making sure that the organizations have enough money to pay individuals living wages and have enough money to meet what they need to provide for their staff, and to continue that happening, as we get out of the other end of things. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what comes in the next year and a half as well, and see what happens with the sector as we kind of come out of this area of having lots of funding and support from federal governments and provincial governments, and that's been really pumping into the sector and keeping us all afloat. And it'll just be a matter of finding out what does it look like on the other end, and nobody knows right now.
All right. Oh, Councillor Morrison.
So, through the chair to Sid, you've just, I just got your text to, do the segue, and that is, what is the plan for a follow-up study? I mean, this study was sort of done in the midst of COVID with some potential future forecasting, but is there something on the books to actually reach out to this group again, or to do the same sort of survey in, say, another 18 to 24 months? I just find sometimes that when we do these surveys on sectors, it's too long ago before we get to hear about that sector again. So is there some plans in the work for maybe a modified or maybe perhaps shorter version? I mean, Sarah, you've done a great job. You probably don't want to have to deal with as much data again, but can we see something back after we've gone through a bit more recovery? And I do think somewhere around 18 months, maybe 2 years at the outset would be a good plan. But
Definitely. So Andrea, you can speak to that more.
No, please go ahead, Sydney.
Oh, I was just going to say our plan is to sit and we're presenting to the NAEDP next week, and then we'll be having a conversation with them as well around, what our findings were and what our future opportunities are. So that definitely is on our mind, is to continue looking at and use this study to kind of launch off and find out how we can fix and figure things out for people.
So I would add to that is one of the reasons that we built using the BR&E type questions was also, let's say Nelson does a multi-sectoral business retention and expansion survey in 18 months or 24 months. It's not just the arts sector, but is all the sectors. The questions are comparable. If you want to compare their responses to what we did to previous BRE surveys that were done in Nelson or the regional district, or like they're apples to apples. It's a tool, it's published. Because I'm not a private corporation, I will share everything with everyone all of the time. So all of that information is there to allow transferability and comparability over time to make it easy for future folks. Andrea?
Yeah, I think you guys both touched on a few things. So one, I think we want to make sure we really digest the findings from this study and act on them. And so one area we've identified we want to better understand is that low uptake of existing supports, and figure out, are there ways we could drive uptake, and are there areas we could advocate for to ensure there's more relevant supports for the sector in the future. And then I'll speak for Sydney. I'm sure the sector would love to see, a scheduled date for a follow-up survey, because it's hard to tackle issues like housing and to inform strategy if you don't have data to rely on. So we don't have anything scheduled right now, but again, I think if we're talking about creating a vision for the sector, that ongoing research would need to be a key part of that.
And ideally, in about 18 months, we'll have a better idea of what the supply side or the demand side is looking like. So that will be something that we'll be able to draw on more as we actually are able to have audiences and be all together. So that's definitely, yes, Councillor Morrison, great idea.
Okay, is that a natural end here? Is there any other questions? Okay, well, I wanted to thank Sydney and Sarah and Andrea for a really in-depth research project and great information. And thank you for your presentation tonight and giving us this information. All right. Thank you very much, all three of you. We'll be moving on now to our third and final agenda piece. And this is the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, CKIS. And the summary is, Aaron Bates of CKIS will present with regards to invasive species issues in the Central Kootenay region. The presentation will include information on species of concern in the City of Nelson area, past initiatives led by CKIS, and those currently being undertaken. Additionally, information about the tools and resources available to the city to address invasive species will also be included. So, Aaron Bates. Hello, Aaron.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
I can. And everyone on the screen can, yes.
Great. Well, I will jump right into it, although I have to say I was fairly fascinated with the first two presentations. We're getting a quite excellent cross-section here. Just give me one moment. Hopefully this works for me. Where are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, better and better.
Does everyone at all the counselors at home see the screen? Okay, Erin, it looks good. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. My name is Erin Bates. I'm the Executive Director here at CCAS. And I just wanted to give you guys some updates on some work that's been happening in the city and some planning that's happening as well. So for those of you who are less familiar with us, the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society is a nonprofit with a mission to protect our ecosystems and communities by preventing and reducing harmful impacts of invasive species. So again, a little bit of 101 here. Not everybody is super up to speed on the issue, but just to give a recap, invasive species are organisms that cause economic, environmental, or social harm when they're introduced in a new environment where they're not native. There's long lists of various costs involved, but I think those would best be saved for a longer presentation. So just as a little bit of background for the city of Nelson and context. Sorry, pop up there. So just in general, in the province of British Columbia, we have what's known as the Weed Control Act. So all landowners and managers are responsible for controlling listed noxious weeds on their property. And so in accordance with this, Nelson has been taking steps in recent years to start controlling some municipal dumping sites as a priority, both from a public perception perspective as well as from a sort of meeting their obligations under the regulation. And that's been going quite well. We've been working on that since 2019 with the Public Works Department. And then further, as far as sort of regulatory power, that cities have the authority to regulate, prohibit, and impose requirements in relation to alien invasive species. And so Nelson has a property maintenance bylaw that was updated in 2013 to sort of specifically address invasive plants on people's property. And that is definitely a great step. Sorry, am I unshared now?
Yeah, your okay. Sharing went away.
Okay, 1 second.
This is our new life.
I don't use WebEx very much. I must have pressed.
There you go. It's back.
Could the boardroom mute, please?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So I was just asking the boardroom to mute once, of course, Mayor is done speaking. Thanks. It was just interfering with your voice. Sorry, Erin, go ahead.
No problem. And now we're stuck. Okay. So yes, I was just mentioning that the City of Nelson has a property maintenance bylaw that mentions invasive plants. And I just wanted to highlight the potential that the city has to sort of institute greater levels of regulation, and that step is being taken by other municipalities in the province. It's certainly not widespread, so municipalities that are moving this direction, I would say, are not going above and beyond so much as leading the pack. And so the one that I sort of tend to highlight because I feel like it sort of meets the most needs in the invasive species world is the one that the District of Squamish currently has. It's quite new, and it basically prohibits sowing, planting, cultivating, or releasing of, or allowing accumulation or spread of invasive. So it's quite broad. It also prohibits the sale of invasive plants and animals, which is very unusual in this province. And it also incorporates sort of fines for treatment and disposal of invasive species that doesn't conform with best management practices. So again, another sort of huge step in a great direction. As far as the city is concerned, so in 2021, we worked with, we came up with a proposal to conduct a complete baseline inventory of the City of Nelson, focusing on municipal properties, including Nelson Hydro, where we could get access. And we also surveyed additional mixed jurisdiction sites and sort of did opportunistic surveys of properties that we could see without trespassing, essentially. So we didn't want to go the route of knocking on doors, especially during the pandemic, but we did get some pretty comprehensive results, I would say. And then the tentative plan moving forward from that baseline inventory is to develop an invasive plant management plan for the city of Nelson that would provide a 5-year overview of invasive plant control priorities and prevention measures that the city could take to sort of support that and save some dollars in the long run. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a highlight of overview of what we found in that inventory and what this management plan and the first year of implementation might look like. So those of you who've been hearing about invasives for a while might not be too surprised to hear that we did find quite a lot of knotweed as one of 10 high priority species that were identified within the city. When I say high priority, those are plants that are identified regionally and provincially as extremely high priority to manage, both due to their potential risk to those various factors that I already mentioned, in combination with the feasibility of control. So when plants become widespread and that landscape level control isn't really feasible, they tend to slide down the priority list scale. But at this point, knotweed is extremely high priority. In spite of being somewhat widespread, the risk is considered extremely high in this province. So yeah, lots of knotweed and then 9 additional priority species. Of the knotweed sites that we surveyed, we tried to break them down by jurisdiction because the thing that that comes up quite frequently with all invasive plant management essentially is that it doesn't matter if you manage it on property A, if it's on property B as well, the long-term management suffers. So yeah, we were able to pull out the sort of 100% municipality sites. But as you can see from this list, there's quite a few of sites that are 100% private land or shared jurisdiction, which means that landowners would need to cooperate to actually manage that site effectively. So this jurisdiction issue is partly why I bring up the regulatory piece, because I think in the long run, even if the municipality is completely controlling everything possible on their jurisdiction, jurisdictions that are not directly managed by the city would need to be regulated in order to ensure that that is effective in the long run. And that can take a number of different forms. So knotweed sites, I just wanted to show you a pretty map of where they are. Pretty evenly scattered throughout the city, and definitely the pink is municipal, so there's quite a high number of municipal sites. And the 32 sites on this map that are municipal does include 12 sites that we have been managing in the first stages with the city over the past couple of years. So it's not an unsurmountable task. And then to just touch on the other priority species. So these are species that we would strongly recommend as priorities to manage. And they include heart-potted hoary cress, bighead knapweed, blueweed, teasel, yellow iris, cutleaf blackberry, Scotch broom, hoary alyssum, and common tansy. And those are listed in order of priority. And there's another little map of where those species are found. I think you mostly, councillors, received this presentation, so you can dig into it a little more, and always feel free to ask questions. So as far as what we're proposing moving forward, the first step in everything that we recommend is always prevention and awareness, because it's very well known that invasive species are primarily spread by human activities. And so if you're able to increase public awareness of how they can prevent those accidental spread, your chances of success just escalate, and your cost to control in the long run go down quite significantly. So we've proposed that we hold some training for city staff to ensure that people who are dealing with plants on a day-to-day basis are quite familiar with the species that are a concern. And then increasing public awareness, primarily at this point through interpretive signage, but there's lots of other opportunity, and we've worked with the city in the past on shared social media posts and news releases and that type of thing as well. So for knotweed control, we're proposing that we control all the knotweed sites that are legal, I guess is the word to say, for treatment. So there are a couple sites that are close to water bodies, which means that herbicide treatment is not an option. under our current regulatory system, which is very strong in British Columbia and Canada. And so, though there are a few sites that would not be treatable, but we would propose that the rest be targeted for eradication over the coming years. And we're obviously focusing on jurisdiction that is 100% municipal, where city can sort of lead the way and show how this can be done. And then as far as priority species, so primarily those are quite small infestations. And so we would recommend that these be manually controlled by a small crew, which we can provide in the coming year. And mostly we think that these can be initially sort of dealt with in first year, and then coming years would be primarily monitoring and keeping up with inventory periodically, I suppose. It gets a little bit trickier when we start talking about Scotch broom. So there are 35 sites of broom within the city of Nelson. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with this plant now that you see the yellow flowers. And one of these sites is quite a large, 5.5 hectares is a large broom site. It's fairly dense at the Nelson Hydro Generating Facility property out in Blewett. So we considered that site in particular to be quite a high priority because as you can see on this map, the orange sort of haze line there is the Scotch broom containment line for our region. And so it kind of cuts through the city of Nelson there, and everything outside of that line is a very high priority to control, and many regional partners are actively managing Scotch broom outside of that line, including the Ministry of Transportation and various utilities and industrial partners. So we would strongly recommend that a very minimum of the broom sites that are outside of containment be managed. And to be honest, everything in the city of Nelson is very manageable inside the orange line. And my dream would be to push that orange line back to the bridge because the water is such a natural barrier to spread. Perhaps that's a pipe dream, but I think it's worth considering. So that's our broom suggestion for the moment, but this the Blewett site is going to take the majority of the effort, and it's certainly one of the higher priority spots. Other species that we do recommend some control work happen on would include common tansy and hoary listen. These are considered strategic control species in our region, so typically they're only managed where they are considered a direct threat to specific values because they're pretty widespread. The consideration with common tansy is that it's actually extremely dense in parts of the city, particularly on some sort of abandoned city lots, as well as along the waterfront walkway, where from what I hear, there are numerous reports every year from dog walkers and various members of the public complaining about it. Many issues, and I think from a public perspective, it would be a good approach to start some control work, even if it's just mowing the more sort of egregious areas a couple of times a year to keep the species from flowering and allow some other species a chance to get a foothold. And Horiolism, again, I would only recommend treating on priority sites to prevent its further spread into other areas of our region, which I'll get into in a moment. So we do identify some priority sites in this management plan and in the proposal for the coming year's work. So one of the sort of largest category of priority sites are city parks and trails. And this comes again because of the human spread potential. And they're heavily used. They get a lot of traffic, including people on foot and dogs, and lots of potential for seeds to hitch a ride, so to speak, on people. Within these parks, we would just recommend sort of treating the more widespread species that I already mentioned, so the tansy and Horiolism, as well as any sort of really high priority species that pop up. Many of the sites are quite small and mechanical control will be sufficient, and there could be a couple of sites pending a bit more of a review as we go through this management plan that herbicide application might be a consideration. So that's something we'd have to work through with staff. And overall, just doing this work in these public areas would improve public awareness and serve another purpose of improving public education and hopefully prevention. Another priority site that we looked at, and I think is a really high priority, this is super common, but the public works yard and the gravel storage areas for sanding the roads in the winter are, I would consider, a very high priority. So if the gravel and parking lots have a significant infestation levels, especially around the periphery, and they're constantly undergoing disturbance and city vehicles moving in and out and moving those materials all over the city. So it would be very advisable, I think, to control invasive plants within those sites, just again to prevent further spread into the rest of the city as well as throughout the region. And finally, this is an ongoing project. We're just in the sort of early stages of finalizing this longer-term management plan, but we did provide an early proposal just to sort of get the budget process going and initiate some conversation with staff, as well as council. So the tentative plan right now is to implement as much of that as is possible, and working with the city quite closely to develop the scope and adjust that as needs develop. And obviously we'll always be around to provide any sort of guidance or provide any context that the city is looking for as far as potential regulations and policies that could be put in place as well. And every year that we do field work or operational work, we'll certainly provide a summary report to the city with recommendations and a budget for future years. So I think that's pretty much everything I had for you guys. Yeah, I just wanted to end by thanking everyone that we've worked with at the Public Works Department, as well as Colin Innes and Colin McClure in recent years have been extremely supportive and really taking up the torch for invasive species, which is really, really great to see. So thank you so much, and I think thank you to Council as well for supporting this initiative. We're here to help. You can get a hold of us at the sites as well as through the staff we've worked with.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Aaron. I have Councillor Page has his hand up, and we'll start off. Oh, Councillor Charwood. Councillor Charwood and Councillor Page. Go ahead.
I lowered my hand, but I'll take a moment and just thank you, Aaron, for your presentation. I was out pulling iris down at the lake shore in the fall and know how much work this work is, and I'm glad to have you there nudging us along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Charwood. Councillor Page?
Well, I will spare you my stories of knotweed that we used to control in Fairview. I just note that there are 2 bright dots on that spot I was working on for a number of years.
Oh dear.
Assuming it's bloomed, because we never got rid of it. So I was wondering, and going through your report over the weekend here and listening to your guys' presentation, this is obviously something that is really, it takes the whole community, holds community effort in order to control these species. I guess this question is to staff. Are we looking at the regulatory suggestions outlaid in this presentation in terms of setting an appropriate infraction fee to reflect the true costs that go into maintaining a program like this? And will we see something like this on the work plan in the next few years to make sure we have the regulatory framework that we need in the city to complement the work we'll do on the city property and make sure these species are managed as effectively as possible?
Yeah, so that's already started in regards to discussions with the corporate officer and with Aaron's leadership on the best practices that she sees, that having the corporate officer look at where we're at with what we have and what they have and integrating that. And it is on the work plan. Again, as the work plans plates are pretty full. But the plan was, or the hope was, is that in 2022 we would have a version that would be in line with what Aaron is talking about with Squamish, and it kind of being the standard to be at. So that's where we are going. That's already underway.
And just a supplemental, if I can, Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
So one of the pieces was pointed out there on the sale of seeds, and I know sometimes it's kind of missed, but someone was saying just the other day a noxious weed plant sold as a flower by a brand name that many of us would recognize and think, oh, well, they're probably doing their research, but in this particular scenario, they are. It's not the kind of thing we need to be selling here. Is that something that's going to be within our wheelhouse? Like Squamish is under the same charter as we are they not? Can we just weeds as flowers in the city?
Now, again, I would have to defer to Aaron. She's the expert on this. I'm not, but,
sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah. Is it the boardroom? Is it not muted? I'm not sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
My expertise is certainly somewhat limited. There aren't, but I have access to a lot of people with experience. My gut says that if the District of Squamish was able to get that through, then it's legal. Trick is, and it, to me, it's a godsend because it's a massive legal gap in our province. I would say the Canadian sort of the federal border controls are our only management tool at the moment in Canada for controlling, invasives in seed form, and it doesn't really help when you have seed that's produced within Canada and sold as an ornamental that is highly, highly invasive, and it's a very common problem even with the most well-intentioned of companies, because there's no stick, and B, there's no incentive for them to even initiate that on their own. And so if no one's telling them they need to, it's a cost and an issue that they're not going to be addressing. So, if the city is able, which I think they are, and willing, which I think is the other big piece, I think that would fill a really major gap in our region, not to mention the rest of the country.
All right.
And again, we'd have to rely on Aaron and her team to be going through all our different places and picking them off, and then phoning our bylaw to get down with some tickets for exactly how we would do it.
Well, people might take us seriously if our phone call included an actual reference to some sort of law they were breaking.
Fair enough.
Well, and if it
a
goes
lot of
on
outreach, but the uptake is low, unfortunately.
And if it goes on a sign, like if it says on those informational signs that these seeds are not allowed to, these are commonly sold as, and that is not allowed.
I love that you picked up on that, Keith. Thank you.
It seems, Aaron, that one of the hallmarks of these species is a total takeover of an area, that nothing really else can grow. Is that kind of a hallmark that we're looking at here? Because I've definitely seen on the North Shore these patches of knotweed where the ground there's nothing there. It's just knotweed. It's just totally bizarre.
Yeah, I think for the majority of invasive plants in particular, that's a feature that makes them invasive in their new homes, essentially. It's interesting, I hear stories of people who've been to Japan where knotweed is native, and they just say it doesn't grow like that. It's little patches in the woods. It doesn't form those monocultures that we see, and so there's something that it's not having to fight here that it has to fight in its native areas. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing how these plants can just take over an area. Is there any other questions? Oh, CEO.
Aaron, what do you think the knowledge level in our community is of the various plants? Like I believe, for example, tansy, if you try to pull it out, it spreads by its roots. So, pulling it out just creates a bigger problem than treating it, cutting its heads off and whatever. So is the knowledge, there around how to manage some of these on private property? Because there's one thing about putting in regulations. There's we prefer to try to work with people to do the right thing, and lots of times they don't necessarily know what the right thing is.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I feel like awareness is growing of the issue, but not so much of the solutions, especially in terms of, detailed management strategies. Knotweed, I think the message is out that mechanical sort of disturbances makes it worse, but other species probably it's a lot more vague, and people are Googling and trying to do what they can when they are aware of it. I did want to mention on the regulatory piece that, and I don't know what they're doing in Squamish, to be honest, but I feel like there's a really good case to be made for rolling out a bit of an incentive program if you're going to roll out a major piece of legislation like that. Roslyn actually has a little one for knotweed specifically, so they prohibited the cultivation of knotweed in Roslyn a few years back, but they also rolled out a support program for landowners to apply for basically a subsidy to have the plant treated on their private property. So they've, I think they've seen some pretty good success with that, and more, it's just an easier conversation to have, especially a big ask like hiring a herbicide contractor. That's a pretty big bill for, people who are already struggling with housing costs to be dealing with.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Erin. That's really, really great information to have. And I'm glad to hear you're working with our CFO on this. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Take care out there. Okay. With that, the next item is council reports. Yes, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Woodward. So I just want to report a little bit on the RDCK at this meeting, and it's because we've now had two budget meetings for the regional district, and tomorrow night, please take note, tomorrow night is the public budget presentation for Nelson and Area E and F. Starts at 7 o'clock. If you want the information to how to get on, I know it's been advertised in the paper, but you can go to the rdck.ca site and put in public budget meeting, and you'll get all of the information. You can come join the meeting by computer or by telephone, and when you're on that page on the RDCK site, you will see actually the budgetary numbers that I'm going to briefly just go over right now. You can just push on it. You're not going to get the 213-page budget for the regional district. You will actually get just 3 pages for Nelson, E, and F at the bottom of the page. So makes life a little bit simpler. So overall in the regional district this year, there are tax increases for most areas within the regional district. Some actually, there's one area, Area C, which is over on the East Shore, actually has a negative tax increase of almost 2%, and they range from the negative of 2 all the way up to a 30.8% increase for the village of Slocan this year. The City of Nelson increase in tax requisition to the RD is currently sitting at 3.6, which puts us in the lower part of the 20 participants within the regional district of Central Kootenay. So basically the services that we have, that we share with the regional district, are general administration, which is actually the one service that has gone up the most this year at 16.9%. I did make a point at the last budgetary meeting of stating our concern around this particular service, which tends to increase every year. Of course, within this service are salaries, but duplication of salaries for many of the same salaries we pay here in the City of Nelson. So for the CAO, financial officers, other administrative staff. And it tends often when there's not a service to put something that we want to do in, it goes into there. So sometimes there's overlapping services that the regional district participates in, and we as a city pay, and that we also have as a service, again. say, looking at food policy, or this year there was quite an increase to their climate change program. It's not that we're not in favor of climate change, but we've got Nelson Next to implement. So I did bring up that issue on whether or not we need to be looking at the development of another service, and that's participants, like all services are participants only, but where the city of Nelson wouldn't sort of be paying double because we're already supporting our own processes. GIS is another area that we're involved with, and it's staying, actually it's gone down a little bit this year, but we are looking at that continued service, I know internally, to make sure that it's meeting our needs, because it doesn't do quite the detailed mapping that we would like to see here in the city, that what we are currently getting from the regional district. Unchanged this year is our economic development funding, which is staying in at $114,000, and of which we can obviously appreciate from some of the presentations tonight. We had Andrea Wilkie there, and this is an important service, and I think that we're all very glad to participate with our neighbors ENF in looking at regional economic development. We give a little bit of money to search and rescue for the area, pretty much unchanged, down about $4,000 from the previous year. We're also involved with a bit of emergency planning, just so we can plan together as partners. We do run our own emergency planning here within the city of Nelson, as does the regional district have their own planning, but it's very important that we are able to collaborate together.
I just want to ask you a question with that particular piece there. Like in a wildfire situation in the regional district, let's say it was on the edge of town, but it was in the regional district, so we would work together in that situation. If it was in the regional district, not near us, do they call on us?
They could potentially. I'm going to let the CEO answer that.
Depending on what the impact is, they might need to open a reception center here, which would be important for us to know that they want to relocate people into our community. So we'd certainly have those discussions. If there's any risk that it might escalate to the city, we'd certainly have those questions. Certainly when they're at capacity, we've offered that we would help support their EOC. So yes, we would work together.
So it's really a back and forth communication and services.
Yeah.
Okay, supporting each other. Okay, thank you.
So the next thing is the Refuge Disposal that we participate in. So waste recovery, resource recovery is one of the second highest ticket item that we participate with the regional district at 1.4, almost $1.5 million. Garbage, as I like to say, is not cheap. The organics facility, which has been delayed in its implementation and startup and building, has once again been tenured. There was a number of issues that were, in part due to COVID, and this has driven the costs up. So costs of going ahead with the facility now have increased by about $300,000. They were due to some regulatory changes by the Ministry of Environment earlier last year, and then of course, as this I think affects all areas, is there was supply side changes and issues that created an increase in the costs. It is the board just approved those increases to go ahead, and hopefully this building will be up, and it should be operational by the fall of this year. So, and that's going to probably just coincide quite nicely with our continued rollout of our organics waste diversion plans here in the city of Nelson. We have regional parks that we share with EF, Salmo, and Area G. There's been a slight increase there, in part, I believe, because we're trying to help the cycling community here, which is very strong within our area, which is a very strong economic driver, let alone something for those of us who can still ride a bike and get out there, can enjoy for our own personal fitness and And so we've been trying to figure out how we could help the cycling community, because it is throughout the region. So we've given them a little extra money this year going forward. The other service that we're involved with is the community complex facilities. Basically just inflationary increases this year, and if Councillor Page wants to say something, he can add in there, but we're still working that this is still a service that's under review at the regional district. We have not come to a conclusion of the service review. Hopefully that may be done before the next election comes, but my understanding is that that if it's not completed by the end of this election term, it will continue into the next one. So there could be a whole new group of people if those in Area E and F and the other participants change dramatically in terms of their composition after October the 15th of this year. So we continue there. The facilities have really struggled, really because of COVID. And staffing still continues to be a bit of a challenge as we continue to open up with changes in the PHO orders. And the last service that we're involved with is Kootenay West Transit. And it's basically gone up about $3,000. We did write to the regional district about our concerns about apportionment and the slow creep within this shared service. And I was assured at the last budget meeting that that all of these are going to be reviewed. So those members, I believe, Councillor Lautenberg, you sit on the Kootenay Transit, and so there'll be further discussions on making sure that kind of the costs of this are apportioned appropriately going forward. Because again, this is a case where Nelson already funds its own transit system that's been around for 100 years, maybe the 125 that it is that Nelson is old. We've gotten involved with this to make sure that it's smooth and that all of the regional areas can also have transit, but it shouldn't come back to us to be picking up the ever-increasing burden of the transportation system. So some of the good news things are, in terms of waste, I would say, is that we are using an apportionment, looking at budgeting going forward, and West and Central Resource committees are working more closely as we move ahead. And I think that if we can have success in regards to this, that we could look at perhaps having future successes with other services within the regional district to work more as a cohesive team versus 20 councils or representatives that sometimes work as individuals as opposed to the collective whole. So that is my report, and I'd be willing to take any questions from my colleagues.
All right. Do I have any questions from the floor or the screen? No questions. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Look at that giant document. Wow. That's a lot of line items there.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, that was council reports. Any late items? No late items? So, resolution to adjourn. Councillor Lautenberg?
I think we've got Nicole wanting to jump in with a report, so I'm going to.
I'm sorry. I didn't see a hand.
It was more of a late item because I was having troubles connecting at the beginning when you asked
Okay.
for them, and
So
just could we have a conversation about gathering in chambers?
Oh, right. Is that, do we do that?
Sure. I think from staff's point of view, we're feeling comfortable that council could come back into chambers if that's your desire. So I think it's really in your court. I know the PHO is looking at reducing some restrictions here, probably
End of the month.
end of the month here, so you might want to wait and, well, I guess that would be that first,
It's
right?
yes. 6
So
days.
so you might want to wait and see what she chooses to do there, but I don't think there's any restrictions now that council couldn't come back and be in council chambers.
So, clarification, are you saying it's just basically our choice to take the risk? Or that it's...
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we're still as a staff trying to limit the number of staff that we have, in any one room working together. You're certainly have that as council. If you all come together and you do get an outbreak, then that certainly impacts your ability to do business. But we think the risk is relatively low now. I think we've had some on council that had COVID, and all of you are boosted up. So, so really, it's kind of your risk tolerance, I guess.
Okay, thank you, CAO. Yep, Councillor Lottenberg?
Yeah, for my part, I'm happy, comfortable to take that risk and start meeting together in chamber.
Okay. So I think it's a choice that we each have to make and take the risk that comes with that, but it seems like, yes. The next meeting.
If I may?
Yes,
Or
Councillor
we-
Page.
Thanks. I have personal comfort around it, but I think on a principled basis, we had pegged what we were doing to city policy so that we were in the same boat as our other organizational units. So I would look to us to follow that lead, I think, a little bit, or either follow that lead or set that lead. So did I hear, Kevin, that you guys will re-examine how you are limiting staff meeting in singular rooms in the coming weeks, or are you moving to the end of the month? Like, what's the timeline for those kinds of re-examinations?
Well, we'll wait to see what the PHO says. I think the fact that, we have a number of services that depend on, us having the bodies to be able to provide those services, we're going to be probably, fairly risk conservative until we, get on, I think we're on the better side of this, but I don't think it's worth the risk versus the reward for having a number of staff together in, in a lunchroom or that sort of thing. I think council's a little bit different. I think councils function better when you are in person, whereas we can, most meetings we can do without necessarily having everybody in the same room. But as far as our departments, we have, we've mostly eliminated, people working in shifts and those sorts of things, but certainly still trying to limit the number of people in any one room if it's not necessary to, to be productive.
Yeah, I think the critical point here is that, you wouldn't want an outbreak at, Public Works or at the, at one, or a treatment plant where you lose a bunch of people all at once is really, really challenging. So, yes, and so, Councillor Morrison.
So I just, in terms of looking at procedures and policy, obviously the council's ruled by the procedural bylaw, and as a result of COVID and the processes that we've gone through for the last 2 years, we have had changes to that bylaw, and it does currently state that we are now on a go-forward basis allowed to have virtual meetings. So we've now embedded that component, which wasn't really there in the past. It was, at the pleasure of the mayor to say that it was all right for you to be at home or perhaps be on vacation and call in or whatever you felt was necessary. And that the procedural bylaw says that at least 2 members of the council must be present in council chambers. And so if people have a level of uncomfortness to not come back into chambers, I think that's fine. There's not anything that says we all have to all be here or we all don't have to be here. And I think each individual circumstance will take place. I don't have any children. I probably nobody's going to bring even a cold home to me, but some of you have small children and colds and bugs and all kinds of things go around, and maybe you choose that on that particular night you need to be staying home, not due to COVID or any other, but to other reasons, and you have that option. And I think we made a good choice in updating and amending, given the fact that we have the technology to do this, even though we know it doesn't run as smooth as it possibly could. But that option is there for us to be able to exercise, and I think that makes the safety of the work environment much more usable.
Yeah, it's amazing that, we never thought about these kind of things like we do now. Like, post-COVID, it's really, we're aware of all that spreading illness around. So, yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else? We were at late items.
So I would suggest council give that some thought. I think what I'm hearing is that will be a personal choice whether you come in or not. We'll see what the PHO says at the end of the month. Unless something, changes to the negative, then I think leaving it in your hands to decide whether you want to come in or not is probably where you want to be.
Okay. Thank you, CAO. All right. And with that, a resolution to adjourn. So, Councillor Lautenberg, Councillor Renwick, all in favor? Thank you.
Just for those online, I think we're going to finish the earlier session, so do not exit this meeting.
That's right.
We'll just stop the stream and take a brief recess to allow the public to leave, and then.
Yeah, we have to go back in camera. Okay. Thank you very much.